The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the windshield as Olivia Matthews adjusted her rearview mirror to check on her 6-month-old daughter, Emma. The baby's eyes were wide with wonder, tiny fingers reaching toward the dancing light patterns across her car seat. Olivia smiled, momentarily forgetting the gridlock that had brought Highway 16 to a standstill for the past 20 minutes. "Looks like we're going to be late for Grandma's birthday?" Olivia sighed, her eyes scanning the sea of vehicles stretching ahead. Horns blared impatiently as drivers leaned out of windows, faces contorted with frustration. What should have been a quick weekend drive had transformed into a test of patience. Emma, blissfully unaware of adult concerns, giggled at her own reflection in the window. Through the haze of summer heat rising from the asphalt, Olivia noticed something unusual at the center of the commotion. At first glance, it looked like a large rock or debris that might explain the traffic jam. But as she squinted against the glare, her heart skipped a beat. There, in the middle of the third lane, was an enormous brown bear, her swollen belly heaving with each labored breath. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered, instinctively reaching back to protect Emma, though they were safely locked inside their car. The massive creature was clearly in distress, her powerful limbs trembling as she struggled to stay upright. Several yards ahead, a truck driver had emerged from his cabin, frantically waving at approaching vehicles to slow down. The bear let out a guttural moan that seemed to cut through the mechanical drone of engines. Her massive paws scraped helplessly against the scorching pavement as she collapsed onto her side. Even from a distance, Olivia could see the panic in the animal's eyes, wild with fear, yet glazed with exhaustion. "She's pregnant," came a voice from the car beside Olivia's. An elderly man had rolled down his window, his weathered face creased with concern. "And I think she's in labor." As if confirming his words, the bear let out another anguished cry, her body contorting in a visible contraction. The sight sent a ripple of tension through the gathered onlookers. Some reached for their phones to record the spectacle, while others dialed frantically for help. A woman in a business suit screamed at the bear to get out of the way, while a teenager shouted that someone should just move it already. Amid the growing chaos, Olivia felt a strange calm wash over her. She recognized that look of mingled fear and determination in the bear's eyes. It was the same expression she'd seen in her own reflection just 6 months ago, when Emma was born. This wasn't just a traffic obstruction. This was a mother fighting for her baby's life in the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. From her car seat, Emma suddenly burst into a fit of delighted laughter, her tiny voice piercing through the cacophony of horns and shouts. The sound was so pure, so incongruously joyful against the backdrop of tension that several people turned to look. And strangely, mysteriously, the bear turned too, her massive head swiveling toward the sound of innocent laughter. For a breathless moment, time seemed to stand still on Highway 16. A connection formed, invisible yet undeniable, between a human infant safe in her car seat and a wild mother bear about to bring new life into the world on unforgiving asphalt under the merciless summer sun. No one could have predicted what would happen next, or how a baby's laughter would change everything. The bear's eyes, dark pools of pain and fear, fixed on the source of that innocent sound. For a fleeting moment, Olivia could have sworn she saw something like recognition pass between the wild animal and her daughter, a primal understanding that transcended species. Then another contraction seized the bear, and she let out a roar that made the onlookers flinch. "Someone needs to do something," Olivia found herself shouting, rolling down her window despite the danger. "She needs help." A few cars ahead, a man in a park ranger uniform emerged from a green SUV. His name badge read Daniel Crawford, and the set of his shoulders spoke of both authority and concern. "Everyone stay in your vehicles," he commanded, his voice carrying above the din. "I've called for wildlife rescue, but they're at least 30 minutes out." "That bear isn't going to wait 30 minutes, muttered the elderly man in the car beside Olivia's. His wife clutched his arm, her eyes never leaving the suffering animal. As if to confirm his words, the bear let out another heart-wrenching cry. This time, Olivia saw something small and dark emerge from beneath the bear's tail. A cub, slick with birth fluids, tumbled onto the hot asphalt. The tiny creature was no larger than a puppy, its fur matted and eyes tightly closed. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered, tears welling in her eyes. She's giving birth right now. The mother bear, exhausted from the ordeal, barely had strength to turn and nuzzle her newborn. The cub squirmed weakly on the scorching pavement, its tiny paws already blistering from the heat. Emma, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, had fallen silent. Her wide blue eyes were fixed on the scene outside, one tiny hand pressed against the window. Then, without warning, a deafening horn blared from the opposite lane. A massive 18-wheeler, its driver unaware of the unfolding drama, was attempting to navigate around the traffic jam. The sound startled the weakened mother bear, who lurched to her feet in a desperate attempt to protect her vulnerable cub. She swayed dangerously, her legs buckling beneath her massive frame. "No!" Several voices cried out at once as the bear stumbled toward the edge of the highway, leaving her newborn behind on the burning asphalt. That's when Olivia made a decision that would later be called both reckless and miraculous. Grabbing a blanket from Emma's diaper bag, she flung open her car door. "Ma'am, stop!" Ranger Crawford shouted. But Olivia was already moving, driven by an instinct as old as motherhood itself. Time seemed to slow as she approached the tiny cub, blanket outstretched. The mother bear, disoriented and weak, swung her massive head toward Olivia, nostrils flaring. 20 feet away, then 15, then 10. Olivia could smell the bear's musky scent, could see the blood-matted fur around her haunches, could feel the weight of everyone's eyes upon her. Behind her, Emma let out another peal of delighted laughter, the sound impossibly bright against the tension. And once again, the bear's attention shifted toward the sound, her aggressive stance softening almost imperceptibly. Taking advantage of the distraction, Olivia quickly but gently slid the blanket beneath the squirming cub, careful not to make any sudden movements. The tiny creature was burning up, its miniature chest heaving with rapid breaths. "It's okay," she whispered, though whether to the cub, the mother bear, or herself she couldn't say. "It's going to be okay." From the corner of her eye, she saw Ranger Crawford edging closer, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, please move slowly back toward your vehicle," he said in a low, steady voice. "The mother is already in labor with the second cub, and she's confused and dangerous right now." Sure enough, the bear had sunk back down to the pavement, her massive body heaving with another contraction. But her eyes never left her firstborn, now nestled in the blanket in Olivia's trembling hands. "What do I do?" Olivia asked, her voice barely audible above the idling engines. The cub in her hands felt impossibly fragile, its life literally in her palms. Before the ranger could answer, a collective gasp rose from the onlookers. The mother bear, in her distress, had rolled dangerously close to the edge of the highway, where a steep embankment dropped into a ravine below. One more roll, and she would tumble down, likely killing herself and her unborn cub. "She's going to fall!" someone screamed. Several car doors opened at once as people, moved by the unfolding tragedy, rushed forward to help. Emma's laughter rang out again, louder this time, followed by excited babbling. The sound seemed to reach something deep inside the suffering mother bear, who steadied herself with a mighty effort, paws scrambling for purchase on the smooth asphalt. Ranger Crawford had reached Olivia now, his experienced hands gently taking the blanket-wrapped cub. "This little one needs its mother," he said, "but we need to move the mother to safety first." The next few minutes unfolded in a blur of coordinated chaos. Under the ranger's guidance, several drivers, including the truck driver who had first tried to warn others, formed a human chain, using their bodies to create a barrier between the mother bear and the dangerous embankment. Others grabbed blankets, jackets, and even car floor mats to create a makeshift path away from the scorching pavement. All the while, Emma continued her innocent commentary of coos and giggles from inside Olivia's car, the simple sound somehow cutting through the tension like a beacon of hope. And remarkably, the mother bear seemed to respond to it, her wild eyes frequently turning toward the source of that pure, uncomplicated joy. "It's working," Ranger Crawford murmured in disbelief as the bear, between contractions, began to drag herself along the path of blankets, away from the edge and toward a shaded area beneath the highway overpass. "I've never seen anything like this." The crowd, which had been so impatient and angry just moments before, now worked with single-minded purpose. A woman in scrubs, who identified herself as a veterinary technician, stepped forward to offer guidance. A construction worker from one of the stalled vehicles brought a cooler of ice water. Someone else produced a first aid kit. As they carefully moved the first cub along the same path, following the mother at a safe distance, Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder. It was the elderly man from the neighboring car, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered cheeks. "I've been driving this highway for 40 years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Never seen humans and nature work together like this, all because your little one knew what to do when the rest of us didn't." Olivia turned back toward her car where Emma sat, still captivated by the unfolding drama, tiny hands clapping with delight. Something powerful and primal swelled in Olivia's chest, a connection to this wild mother fighting for her babies, to her own precious daughter, to the strangers who had become allies in the face of life's raw vulnerability. Under the overpass, the mother bear had settled again, her massive body heaving with the effort of delivering her second cub. The wildlife rescue was still at least 15 minutes away, but thanks to the impromptu community that had formed on Highway 16, she would no longer face this ordeal alone. "Keep everyone back at least 30 feet, Ranger Crawford instructed, his voice calm but authoritative. "She's still a wild animal, and mothers protecting newborns are especially unpredictable." The crowd respectfully retreated, forming a wide semicircle around the laboring bear. Olivia returned to her car to check on Emma, who had inexplicably fallen silent. When she peered into the back seat, she found her daughter watching the scene with an almost unnatural intensity, her usual baby babble replaced by focused attention. "She knows something's happening," the elderly man's wife whispered, having followed Olivia. Her name was Martha, she'd explained, and she'd been a midwife for 40 years before retiring. Children have a sense about these things, life recognizing life. A sudden commotion drew their attention back to the bear. The second cub was emerging, but something was wrong. The mother bear was struggling more than before, her powerful body trembling with exhaustion. The veterinary technician, who had introduced herself as Sofia Rodriguez, crept forward cautiously. "The cub is breech," she said after a moment of observation, her voice tight with concern. "It's coming feet first instead of head first. She might not be able to deliver it without help." "And if she can't?" Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Both mother and cub will likely die," Ranger Crawford said grimly. "And rescue is still at least 12 minutes out according to my last update." The temperature under the overpass was rising as the midday sun beat down on the concrete. The mother bear's breathing had become shallow and rapid, her eyes glazing over with exhaustion. The first cub, still nestled in the blanket a safe distance from its mother, had begun to make tiny mewling sounds of distress. "I've assisted with difficult births in wildlife rehabilitation," Sophia said, turning to the ranger. "But never in the field, and never with a bear. It's risky, but I don't think we have a choice if we want to save them." Before the ranger could respond, a new sound cut through the tense atmosphere. The wail of sirens approaching rapidly. For a moment, relief washed over the gathered crowd. But the mother bear, startled by the unfamiliar noise, lurched to her feet with unexpected strength. She swayed dangerously, her distress evident as she tried to reach her first cub, while the second remained partially delivered. "No, no, no," Ranger Crawford muttered, raising his hand in a futile attempt to slow the approaching emergency vehicles. "The sirens are going to stress her even more." The sirens grew louder, and the bear's panic intensified. With a desperate roar, she began to drag herself and her partially born cub toward the first one, leaving a trail of blood on the makeshift blanket path. The crowd gasped in collective horror. Then, cutting through the chaos like a beam of sunlight, came Emma's voice once more. Not laughing this time, but singing, or rather, making a rhythmic melodic sound that wasn't quite words, but carried the unmistakable cadence of a lullaby. Olivia stared at her daughter in astonishment. Emma had never made sounds like this before. The effect on the bear was immediate and astonishing. Her frantic movements slowed, her massive head turning toward Emma's song. For several heartbeats, she stood perfectly still, her wild eyes fixed on the child. "Keep her doing that," Sophia whispered urgently to Olivia. "It's calming the mother down." Olivia nodded, her own eyes filling with tears as she watched her daughter sway slightly in her car seat, continuing her improvised melody. The mother bear, seemingly entranced by the sound, lowered herself back to the ground, her breathing steadying. Taking advantage of this unexpected calm, Sophia approached the bear with slow, deliberate movements. "I need supplies," she called softly over her shoulder. "Clean towels, water, and hand sanitizer at minimum." As if spurred by a collective instinct, the crowd mobilized. A businessman produced a first aid kit from his trunk. A family on vacation offered clean beach towels. Someone passed forward a bottle of hand sanitizer. Through it all, Emma continued her strange, soothing song, and the mother bear remained focused on the child, as if drawing strength from the simple melody. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as nothing short of miraculous. Under Sophia's careful guidance, with Ranger Crawford providing instructions based on his wildlife training, and with Emma's song keeping the mother bear in an almost trance-like state, they managed to assist with the birth of the breech cub. "It's a girl," Sophia announced with tears in her eyes as the second cub finally emerged fully, noticeably smaller than her sibling. "And she's alive, but barely breathing." The tiny creature lay motionless on the towel, her wet fur barely rising with shallow breaths. The mother bear, seeing her second cub, let out a low moan that seemed to contain all the pain and fear of a parent facing the unthinkable. In that moment, something extraordinary passed between Olivia and the bear, a look of such profound understanding that it transcended the boundaries between human and animal. They were simply two mothers, united in the universal desire to protect their young. Without thinking, Olivia began to hum along with Emma's melody, the simple tune carrying across the hushed highway. Others joined in, a spontaneous chorus rising from the gathered strangers, creating a cocoon of sound around the struggling bear family. Under this unusual serenade, Sophia worked quickly, clearing the tiny cub's airways and gently massaging her chest. "Come on, little one," she whispered. "Your mama needs you." As if in response to the collective will of the humans surrounding her, the cub suddenly jerked and let out a tiny, squeaking cough. Then another and another, until she was breathing steadily, her miniature chest rising and falling with growing strength. A cheer erupted from the onlookers, quickly hushed as they remembered the delicate situation. The mother bear, hearing her cub's sounds, stretched her neck toward her second offspring. With gentle movements, Sophia placed both cubs close to their mother, but still on the protective towels to shield them from the rough ground. It was at this precise moment that the wildlife rescue team finally arrived, their vehicles pulling up with sirens now silenced. A team of professionals in khaki uniforms spilled out, equipment in hand, prepared for an emergency situation, only to stop short at the sight that greeted them. Instead of the chaotic scene of a wild animal in distress surrounded by panicked motorists, they found something entirely unexpected. A circle of strangers from all walks of life, standing in respectful silence as a mother bear nuzzled her newborn cubs, the sound of a baby's improvised lullaby floating on the summer air. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the lead wildlife veterinarian, approached Ranger Crawford with an expression of disbelief. "We got reports of a bear giving birth on the highway," she said quietly, "but I never expected this." She gestured to the unlikely scene before them. "We didn't either," the ranger replied, his professional demeanor momentarily cracking to reveal genuine wonder. "That baby over there," he nodded toward Emma, who was still swaying and singing in her car seat, "somehow knew exactly what this mother needed, and then everyone just followed her lead." As the rescue team prepared to safely transport the bear family to a wildlife rehabilitation center, a new complication arose, one that would test this newfound harmony between humans and nature in ways no one could have anticipated. Dr. Chen was examining the mother bear from a cautious distance, her experienced eyes taking in the animal's condition. "She's lost a significant amount of blood," she informed Ranger Crawford, her voice low but urgent, "and I'm concerned about her vital signs. We need to move her quickly, but the stress of transport could be dangerous in her weakened state." Just as she finished speaking, a deep rumble echoed through the overpass. At first, the crowd thought it was thunder from an approaching summer storm, but Ranger Crawford's face paled as he recognized the sound. "Everyone back to your vehicles now," he shouted, his commanding tone breaking the peaceful atmosphere. "That's a landslide up on the mountainside." The highway cut through a steep mountain pass, with rocky slopes rising sharply on one side. The recent summer heat wave following weeks of unusually heavy spring rains had created perfect conditions for instability in the higher elevations. Now, those conditions had culminated in disaster. Sophia, still kneeling beside the bear family, looked up in alarm. "We can't move her quickly without risking her life, and possibly the cubs too," she protested. "She needs careful handling and a gradual transition." The rumbling grew louder. Through the gaps in the overpass supports, those gathered could see clouds of dust rising from the mountainside about half a mile up the highway. Rocks and debris were already spilling onto the road. "We have maybe 10 minutes before it reaches us," Ranger Crawford said grimly. "That's not enough time for the proper transport protocols." The mother bear, sensing the tension, struggled to rise, her protective instincts overriding her exhaustion. One of the cubs, the firstborn, stronger one, mewled in distress, while the smaller female remained frighteningly quiet. Olivia, who had returned to Emma's side when the commotion began, felt her daughter's small hand clutch her finger with surprising strength. When she looked down, she was startled by the expression on her baby's face. Emma wasn't afraid. Instead, her eyes held a clarity that seemed impossible for a 6-month-old. She was staring directly at the bear family, and then deliberately shifted her gaze to the space beneath the overpass, away from the open highway. Following her daughter's line of sight, Olivia noticed something she hadn't before: a narrow maintenance access road that led down from the highway, disappearing into the dense woods below. It was barely visible, half hidden by summer foliage, but it might offer a route away from the impending landslide. "The access road," she called out, pointing. "Could we move them down there instead of trying to transport them up the highway?" Dr. Chen followed her gesture, brow furrowed in consideration. "It's not ideal. We prefer to take animals to the facility in our specially equipped vehicles. But under the circumstances—" She turned to confer quickly with her team, their voices urgent but too low for others to hear. Meanwhile, the rumbling grew steadily louder. Small pebbles bounced down the highway, harbingers of the larger debris to come. Several drivers had already fled the scene, their abandoned vehicles creating additional obstacles. "We don't have time to debate," Ranger Crawford interrupted the wildlife team's discussion. "That slide is picking up speed. We either move them now or risk losing everyone here." The urgency of the situation crystallized in a single moment when a boulder the size of a small car came crashing down onto the highway just 100 yards up from the overpass. The impact sent tremors through the asphalt beneath their feet. "The access road it is, Doctor," Chen decided, her professional demeanor laced with visible concern. "We'll need to create a stretcher for the mother bear and carriers for the cubs, and we'll need all the help we can get to move her quickly but safely." What followed was an extraordinary demonstration of human ingenuity and cooperation. The construction worker who had earlier provided water now offered the tarp from his truck bed. 6 men from various vehicles volunteered to serve as stretcher bearers. A young couple who had been on their way to a camping trip produced a small tent that could be repurposed to shield the bears from debris during the move. Martha, the retired midwife, approached Dr. Chen with quiet authority. "I've helped move many a new mother in my day," she said. "Different species, same principles. You have to support the pelvic area and keep the birth canal from additional trauma." All the while, the landslide continued its relentless approach. The sound had evolved from a distant rumble to a terrifying roar, like a freight train bearing down on them. Clouds of dust began to reach the overpass, making eyes water and throats constrict. Through it all, Emma continued her strange, melodic humming. The sound seemed to pierce through the chaos, creating a pocket of calm around the bear family. The mother bear, who should have been frantic with fear, remained unnaturally composed, her eyes frequently shifting between her cubs and the human child who sang to her. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Chen muttered, shaking her head in disbelief as they prepared to move the massive animal. "It's almost like they're communicating." "Maybe they are," Olivia replied softly. "Just not in any language we understand." With the improvised stretcher ready, they faced the most dangerous part of the plan: transferring the enormous wild animal onto it. Even weakened by childbirth, the mother bear could easily kill someone with a single swipe of her powerful paws if she felt threatened. "Everyone stay completely silent," Dr. Chen instructed, "except for the baby. Let her keep making that sound. It seems to be working." Olivia lifted Emma from her car seat, bringing her closer, but still at a safe distance, to where the bear lay. Emma's song grew louder, her tiny body swaying rhythmically in her mother's arms. The mother bear's eyes locked onto Emma, her massive head tilting slightly as if listening intently. Under this unusual spell, the wildlife team and volunteers managed to slide the tarp beneath the bear and gently lift her onto the stretcher. The cubs, now secured in special thermal carriers designed for wildlife rescue, were entrusted to Sophia and another team member. "Now comes the tricky part," Ranger Crawford warned as they began moving toward the access road. "That path is steep and probably overgrown. We'll need to move carefully but quickly." The timing couldn't have been more critical. Just as they began their descent down the narrow maintenance road, a cascade of rocks and trees came thundering down onto the highway above. The deafening crash sent birds scattering from nearby trees and shook loose a shower of leaves that fell around the retreating group like green rain. The access road, as predicted, was challenging terrain. Steep in places, with years of neglect having allowed nature to reclaim portions of it. The 6 men carrying the mother bear struggled to maintain their footing on the uneven ground, sweat pouring down their faces from exertion and fear. Halfway down, disaster nearly struck when one of the bearers slipped on a patch of loose gravel. The stretcher tilted precariously, almost spilling its precious cargo down the hillside. The mother bear roared in pain and fear, her eyes wild once more. Emma's song faltered for the first time, replaced by a startled cry. The change was immediate. The bear thrashed on the stretcher, her renewed panic threatening to doom the entire rescue effort. "Keep her singing," Dr. Chen called out desperately to Olivia. "It's the only thing keeping the mother calm enough to move." Olivia, herself terrified by the near catastrophe, held Emma close and began to sing a lullaby, the same one she'd sung to her daughter countless times during late-night feedings. After a moment's hesitation, Emma joined in with her wordless version, their voices twining together in the ancient melody that mothers have used to comfort their children since time immemorial. The effect was profound. The mother bear settled once more, though her eyes now darted between her cubs and the path ahead, as if calculating their chances. "We're almost there," Ranger Crawford encouraged the exhausted stretcher bearers. "I can see the bottom of the hill." Indeed, the dense forest was opening up to reveal a small clearing at the base of the hillside, well away from the landslide's path. But nature had one final challenge in store for them. As they neared the clearing, the distinctive black and white stripes of a skunk appeared directly in their path. "Nobody move," Dr. Chen whispered. "If that skunk sprays near the cubs, their mother will go berserk trying to protect them from the perceived threat." The skunk, apparently as surprised by the unusual procession as they were by his appearance, stood his ground with tail raised in warning. Through some cosmic joke, this tiny creature now held the power to derail their entire rescue operation. Emma, who had been watching the unfolding drama with uncanny focus, suddenly shifted in Olivia's arms. Before anyone could react, she pointed directly at the skunk and made a new sound, a gentle shoo that seemed impossibly deliberate for a child her age. To the astonishment of everyone present, the skunk lowered its tail, gave what almost looked like an indignant shake of its head, and waddled unhurriedly into the underbrush. A collective breath was released as they continued into the clearing, finally setting the stretcher down on level ground. Only when the mother bear and her cubs were safely reunited on a bed of soft blankets did the full impact of their narrow escape hit home. Above them, the landslide had completely blocked the highway where they had been gathered just 30 minutes earlier. The overpass was partially collapsed, and several of the abandoned vehicles had been crushed beneath tons of rock and soil. "We would have all been killed," Martha whispered, clutching her husband's hand tightly. "But we weren't," Ranger Crawford replied, his professional composure finally giving way to wonder as he looked between Emma and the bear family. "Thanks to an extraordinary chain of events that I'm still not sure I believe, even though I witnessed every minute of it." Dr. Chen was already on her satellite phone, coordinating with emergency services, and requesting additional support to reach their location. "We're going to need to hike out through the forest," she informed the group after ending her call. "There's another access road about a mile from here that hasn't been affected by the slide. Transport vehicles will meet us there." "What about the bears?" Olivia asked, cradling a now drowsy Emma against her shoulder. "We'll stabilize the mother here and wait for our specialized equipment to be brought in," Dr. Chen explained. "It's actually better for her to rest before we attempt the final transport to the rehabilitation center." The cubs seemed to be doing remarkably well, all things considered. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, the impromptu community that had formed on the highway faced a new reality. They were strangers brought together by extraordinary circumstances, having just shared an experience that defied easy explanation. Some wept openly from delayed shock, while others laughed with the giddy relief of survivors. A few stood in silent contemplation, watching the mother bear nuzzle her cubs with the same devotion they recognized in themselves. The construction worker, whose tarp had become the bear's stretcher, approached Olivia hesitantly. "I've never been what you'd call an animal person," he admitted, his voice gruff with emotion. "Always thought wild creatures were best left alone. But today—" He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. "Today, I helped deliver a bear cub and carried its mama to safety, all because your little girl somehow knew what to do when none of us did." Emma, as if sensing she was the topic of conversation, stirred against Olivia's shoulder and blinked sleepily. Her gaze drifted to the bear family, and a small smile curved her lips. The mother bear, impossibly, lifted her massive head at that exact moment and looked directly at the child. For one breathtaking instant, something profound and ancient passed between them. An understanding that transcended the boundaries humans had constructed between themselves and the wild world. It was a reminder that beneath the layers of civilization and language, humans remained part of the great web of life that connected all creatures. Then Emma yawned widely, her adventure finally catching up with her, and the spell was broken. But something had changed in everyone who witnessed that silent exchange. A shift in perspective that would remain long after the highway was cleared and life returned to normal. As the group prepared for their hike through the forest, Olivia found herself standing beside Ranger Crawford, both of them watching as Dr. Chen administered fluids to the recovering mother bear. "You know," the ranger said quietly, "in 20 years of wildlife management I've filled out thousands of incident reports, but I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to document what happened here today." Olivia smiled, looking down at her now sleeping daughter. "Maybe some things aren't meant to be documented," she suggested. "Maybe they're just meant to be experienced and remembered." "Maybe," he agreed, his weathered face softening. "Or maybe your daughter just gave us all a lesson in what it means to be truly connected to the world around us. A lesson most of us forgot somewhere along the way to adulthood." As they gathered their belongings for the journey ahead, no one noticed the small, brilliantly colored butterfly that landed briefly on Emma's blanket before fluttering over to rest momentarily on one of the bear cubs. No one, that is, except for the mother bear, whose dark eyes followed its path with an awareness that seemed to hold the wisdom of the ages. The hike through the forest to the secondary access road was challenging but uneventful. The diverse group of highway strangers walked in a loose formation, the wildlife team and their precious cargo at the center. Conversation flowed more easily now, the shared trauma and triumph having dissolved the usual barriers between people. They exchanged names, destinations, life stories, transforming from anonymous travelers into individuals with faces and histories. Olivia learned that Martha and her husband, Gerald, had been married for 52 years and were traveling to their granddaughter's college graduation. The construction worker, whose name was Miguel, was a widower with 3 grown children who had found purpose in building things after losing his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. Sophia, the veterinary technician, was actually on her way to a job interview at the very wildlife center where they were now taking the bears. Talk about making an impression on your future employers, Ranger Crawford joked, earning a tired smile from Sophia. Emma slept soundly against Olivia's chest, carried in an improvised sling made from the baby blanket. Occasionally, her tiny fingers would twitch or her eyelids would flutter, as if she were dreaming of the extraordinary events she had just experienced, or perhaps influenced. After about 40 minutes of hiking, they emerged from the dense forest onto a gravel road where 3 wildlife transport vehicles and several emergency response units waited. Paramedics immediately began checking everyone for injuries, while the wildlife team prepared the specialized transport unit for the bear family. "You all performed something of a miracle back there," said Dr. Chen as she supervised the careful transfer of the mother bear into the climate-controlled transport unit. "By all logic, this mother and at least one of her cubs should not have survived the birth, let alone the evacuation. I think the miracle had a lot to do with that little one," Martha said, nodding toward the sleeping Emma. Dr. Chen's scientific mind clearly wanted to dismiss such a notion, but after what she had witnessed, she could only offer a thoughtful nod. "There are things in this world that science hasn't fully explained yet," she conceded. "The connection between that child and this bear certainly falls into that category." As the various members of their impromptu community prepared to part ways, there was a palpable reluctance to break the bonds that had formed so intensely over just a few hours. Phone numbers were exchanged, promises to stay in touch were made, and more than a few tears were shed. "Will we be able to know how the bears are doing?" Olivia asked Dr. Chen as the wildlife team made final preparations to depart. "Normally, we don't provide updates on wildlife to the public," the veterinarian began, then softened. "But given the extraordinary circumstances, I think we can make an exception. Leave me your contact information, and I'll personally keep you informed of their progress." As Olivia wrote down her phone number and email address, Emma finally stirred from her deep sleep. The moment her eyes opened, she twisted in the sling, looking around with purpose until her gaze settled on the transport vehicle containing the bear family. She made a soft cooing sound, her small hand reaching out. The mother bear, visible through a small ventilation window in the transport unit, raised her head at that exact moment, her dark eyes finding Emma across the distance. There was no way the bear could have heard the baby's soft sound over the ambient noise of the rescue vehicles, yet the timing was uncanny. "I've got to document this," Dr. Chen muttered, pulling out her phone to record the interaction. "This defies everything we understand about wild animal behavior." After a few moments of this silent communication, Emma relaxed back against Olivia, seemingly satisfied. The mother bear, too, settled more comfortably around her cubs. As the transport vehicles pulled away, Olivia felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, wonder, exhaustion, and an indefinable sense of loss, as if something magical was leaving with those bears. Emma watched the vehicles disappear around a bend, her expression unusually solemn for a baby. "She feels it too," Martha said softly, coming to stand beside them. "Whatever connection was formed today, it matters to both of them." The emergency services had arranged for transportation to take the stranded travelers to the nearest town, where they could make arrangements to continue their journeys. As Olivia settled into one of the vans with Emma, Ranger Crawford approached their window. "I just got word about the highway," he informed them. "The landslide was even worse than we feared. They're estimating it will take at least 2 weeks to clear and repair that section of road." "2 weeks?" Gerald exclaimed from the seat behind Olivia. That's going to cause havoc with transportation throughout the region." "Yes," the ranger agreed. "But not a single life was lost, human or animal, and that's something of a miracle, given the scale of the slide." As their van pulled away, Olivia gazed back at the forested hillside. Somewhere up there was the highway where their ordinary journey had transformed into something extraordinary. She wondered if anyone passing that spot in the future would somehow sense the remarkable events that had unfolded there. A birth, a rescue, and a mysterious connection between two very different mothers and their young. 3 days later, Olivia and Emma were finally back home in their cozy apartment in the city. The detour had forced them to miss Grandma's birthday celebration, but the story of their adventure had more than made up for their absence. Olivia had shared some of what happened with her family, though she found herself holding back the more inexplicable aspects. Emma's strange connection to the bear, the almost supernatural calm that had descended during critical moments, the butterfly that had seemed to symbolically link them. Those details felt too private, too magical to fully share. The local news had picked up the story of the bear rescue and the fortuitous escape from the landslide, interviewing Ranger Crawford and Dr. Chen. Their accounts stuck to the facts. A pregnant bear had given birth on the highway. Compassionate citizens had helped wildlife officials, and everyone had evacuated safely before the landslide destroyed the road. Nothing about a baby's laughter turning frightened strangers into a unified community, or a mother bear responding to a child's song. Olivia was relieved. Some experiences deserved to remain sacred and unexplained. On the 4th morning after their return, as Olivia was feeding Emma breakfast, her phone rang with an unknown number. Wiping pureed sweet potatoes from her daughter's chin, she answered cautiously. "Miss Matthews, this is Dr. Rebecca Chen from the Northern Wildlife Rehabilitation Center." Olivia's heart leapt. "Dr. Chen, how are they doing? The bears, I mean." "That's why I'm calling," the veterinarian replied, her tone unreadable. "There's been an unusual development. I don't quite know how to explain it over the phone. Would it be possible for you and Emma to visit the center today?" Olivia felt a flutter of concern. "Is something wrong? Are the cubs okay?" "The cubs are thriving, actually. It's the mother bear's behavior that's—" Dr. Chen paused, seemingly struggling to find the right words. "Look, I know this is an imposition, but I think you need to see this for yourself. We're about an hour's drive from the city." Curiosity overwhelmed any hesitation Olivia might have had. "We'll be there. Just give me the address." After arranging the details of their visit, Olivia quickly cleaned up Emma and packed a diaper bag. Her daughter seemed unusually animated that morning, babbling happily and waving her arms with excitement, as if she understood exactly where they were going. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was nestled in a wooded area outside the city limits, its modern facilities designed to blend harmoniously with the natural surroundings. Dr. Chen met them at the entrance, her professional demeanor unable to completely mask her excitement. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading them through the main building toward a restricted area at the back. "What I'm about to show you has my entire staff questioning everything we thought we knew about bear behavior." They passed through several security doors, eventually emerging onto a covered observation deck overlooking a large, naturalistic enclosure. The habitat was designed to mimic the bear's natural environment, with trees, rocks, a small stream, and various forms of enrichment. The mother bear was visible immediately, her massive form lounging beneath a large pine tree. Her cubs played nearby, already noticeably larger than they had been on the highway just a few days earlier. They tumbled over each other with growing coordination, their antics drawing a smile from Olivia. "They look wonderful," she commented. "I can hardly believe they're the same tiny creatures we saw being born. Bear cubs develop quickly, Dr. Chen explained, but their physical progress isn't what I brought you here to see. As if on cue, Emma let out a delighted squeal, wriggling in Olivia's arms as she caught sight of the bears. The sound carried across the enclosure, and what happened next caused Olivia's breath to catch in her throat. The mother bear's head snapped up, her entire body tensing as her gaze locked onto the observation deck, directly at Emma. With surprising speed for such a large animal, she rose and moved to the closest point in the enclosure to where they stood, her cubs trailing curiously behind. "She's done this every day since arriving," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Multiple times a day, she positions herself at the edge of the enclosure closest to the main building and just waits, stares at the building, grows agitated, eventually returns to her cubs. It's as if she's looking for something, or someone. We couldn't figure it out until just now." She gestured to Emma, who was bouncing excitedly in Olivia's arms, making her distinctive cooing sounds. "She's looking for Emma," Olivia whispered, the realization sending chills down her spine. "That would be my conclusion as well, impossible as it seems, Doctor," Chen agreed. "In 20 years of wildlife medicine, I've never seen anything like this. Bears don't form attachments to humans, quite the opposite. They typically want nothing to do with us, especially when they have cubs." Below them, the mother bear had risen onto her hind legs, her nose working furiously as she tested the air. When Emma laughed, the bear made a soft chuffing sound in response. "This gets even stranger," Dr. Chen continued, leading them along the observation deck to a different angle. "Watch her cubs." From this new vantage point, Olivia could see that the cubs, particularly the smaller female, were mimicking their mother's behavior. Standing on hind legs, sniffing the air, making small vocalizations in response to Emma's sounds. "They've never even seen Emma before," Olivia pointed out. "They were newborns with their eyes closed when we rescued them." "Exactly," Dr. Chen said, "which means either the mother has somehow communicated Emma's significance to her cubs or what?" The veterinarian hesitated. "Or there's something happening here that goes beyond our current scientific understanding." Emma was nearly beside herself now, squirming and reaching toward the bears as if she wanted to join them. The mother bear continued to watch her intently, occasionally making sounds that seemed almost conversational in their rhythm and variation. "This is why you asked us to come," Olivia realized. "You wanted to confirm your theory." Dr. Chen nodded, and to see if Emma would respond the same way. Clearly, she does. She pulled out a tablet and showed Olivia a series of measurements: heart rate, respiratory rate, cortisol levels. "These are the mother bear's vital signs normally, and these are her readings right now while interacting with Emma. Notice anything?" Olivia studied the numbers. "They're lower now. She's calmer?" "Significantly calmer. Bears are typically stressed in captivity, even in the best facilities. But when she's focused on Emma like this, her stress markers drop to levels we'd expect to see in a bear in an optimal, natural habitat." Dr. Chen put the tablet away, her scientific reserve finally cracking to reveal genuine wonder. It's as if seeing your daughter makes her feel safe, at home. As they watched this impossible interaction continue, Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with a tall, distinguished man in his 60s, his silver hair contrasting with the deep brown of his skin. He wore the facility's uniform, but with additional insignia that marked him as someone in authority. "Dr. Blackhawk," Dr. Chen said with evident respect. "This is Olivia Matthews and her daughter Emma, the ones I told you about." He nodded, his deep-set eyes studying Emma with intense interest. "I'm Joseph Blackhawk, the director of this facility," he introduced himself, "and also an elder of the Lakota tribe. Dr. Chen shared your remarkable story with me, and I felt compelled to meet you both." Olivia shifted Emma to her other hip, extending her free hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Instead of taking her offered hand, Dr. Blackhawk reached into a pouch at his belt and removed something small, holding it out to Emma. It was a tiny carved bear no larger than a walnut, made from some dark, polished stone. Without hesitation, Emma reached for the carving, grasping it in her tiny hand with a delighted coo. Below them, the mother bear made an almost identical sound, causing Dr. Blackhawk's eyebrows to rise. "In our traditions," he said quietly, "we speak of certain children who are born with a special connection to the natural world. Those who can understand the language of animals, particularly the great bears, who we consider to be the keepers of wisdom. We call them those who walk between worlds." Under normal circumstances, Olivia might have politely acknowledged such statements while privately dismissing them. But after what she had witnessed on the highway and what she was seeing now, she found herself listening with genuine openness. "These children," Dr. Blackhawk continued, "are said to remind us of what we've forgotten, that humans are not separate from nature but intimately connected to it, that all life speaks the same fundamental language, if only we remember how to listen." He nodded toward Emma, who was now turning the bear carving over in her hands with unusual dexterity for her age. "Your daughter has not yet learned to forget." The mother bear below had settled onto her haunches, watching Emma with unblinking attention. Her cubs, growing bolder, were now play-fighting near the edge of the enclosure closest to where Emma watched, as if performing for her. "What happens when we leave?" Olivia asked, suddenly concerned. "If she's been looking for Emma, won't she be distressed when we go?" Dr. Chen and Dr. Blackhawk exchanged glances. "That's actually the second reason we asked you here today," Dr. Chen admitted. "We have a rather unusual request." Olivia shifted Emma in her arms, suddenly apprehensive. "What kind of request?" Dr. Chen gestured toward a small seating area at the end of the observation deck. When they were all settled, she continued, "The mother bear, we've been calling her Amara, is healing well physically. But her behavior—" She looked to Dr. Blackhawk for support. "Animals, like humans, can form powerful bonds during times of crisis," the elder explained gently. "What happened on that highway wasn't just a physical rescue. It was a profound spiritual exchange. Your daughter somehow reached across the boundaries that normally separate our species. We believe that a more gradual separation might be beneficial," Dr. Chen added, her scientific tone softening. "We're proposing a series of short visits over the next few weeks. It would give Amara time to adjust and would allow us to study this extraordinary connection." Olivia looked down at Emma, who was contentedly playing with the stone bear carving, occasionally glancing up to check on the bears below. "Would it be safe? You would always remain on the observation deck, and our staff would monitor the interactions closely," Dr. Chen assured her. "We're not suggesting any direct contact." Dr. Blackhawk leaned forward slightly. "In our traditions, when a child shows this kind of connection to an animal, it is considered a great responsibility, a gift that must be honored." His weathered face was solemn but kind. "It may sound strange to modern ears, but we believe that such bonds, once formed, should not be severed abruptly." Olivia found herself nodding slowly. Nothing about this situation was normal, so why should the solution be? Besides, she couldn't deny her own curiosity about this mysterious connection between her daughter and the bears. "We can visit," she agreed, "as long as it's safe and as long as Emma seems to enjoy it." The relief on both doctors' faces was evident. "Excellent," Dr. Chen said, standing. "We'll work out a schedule that's convenient for you." As they prepared to leave for the day, Emma began to fuss, struggling in Olivia's arms and reaching back toward the bears with small sounds of distress. "She doesn't want to leave," Olivia realized aloud. Dr. Blackhawk nodded knowingly. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hands. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia allowed him to take Emma. The elder brought the child close to the observation glass, speaking softly in a language Olivia didn't recognize. Lakota, she presumed. Below them, Amara rose up on her hind legs again, pressing a massive paw gently against the barrier of her enclosure, her gaze fixed on Emma. Dr. Blackhawk continued his quiet chant, and to Olivia's amazement, Emma gradually calmed, her distress fading into attentive listening. "What are you telling her?" Olivia asked when he finally returned Emma to her arms. "I told her the ancient story of how bears and humans were once brothers who understood each other's speech," he replied, "and I promised her that she would return to visit her friend." Emma yawned, suddenly sleepy, her small fingers still clutching the stone bear carving. "She can keep that, Doctor," Blackhawk said, noticing Olivia's attempt to return it. "It's a reminder of the connection, for both of you." Over the following weeks, their visits to the Wildlife Center became a cherished routine. Emma would light up with excitement the moment they turned onto the road leading to the facility, babbling happily in her car seat. Amara seemed equally attuned to their arrivals, often positioning herself near the observation area before they even entered the building, as if she somehow sensed they were coming. Dr. Chen meticulously documented each interaction, creating what she called the most unique behavioral study in the history of wildlife rehabilitation. The cubs, now growing rapidly and full of energy, would perform increasingly elaborate play routines whenever Emma was watching, tumbling over each other and staging mock fights that had the distinct quality of a performance. Other staff members at the center began to take notice. Some remained skeptical, attributing the behaviors to coincidence or overinterpretation. Others became regular observers of the strange communion between human child and bear family, their scientific detachment gradually giving way to wonder. Sophia, who had indeed secured the job at the center after her highway heroics, became a particular ally, often adjusting her schedule to be present during Olivia and Emma's visits. "It's changing how I see my work," she confided to Olivia one afternoon, as they watched Emma conversing with Amara through a series of gestures and sounds that seemed to have developed their own rhythm and meaning. "I always thought my job was about healing animals so they could return to the wild, separate from us. But now I wonder if true healing might sometimes involve connection rather than separation." As summer turned to early fall, Dr. Chen called Olivia with both good and difficult news. Amara and her cubs had recovered fully and were ready for release back into the wild. A remote, protected area had been selected, far from human settlements but with abundant food sources and suitable den sites for the approaching winter. "We'd like you and Emma to be present for the release," she said. Dr. Blackhawk believes it would provide proper closure for both Amara and Emma. The day of the release dawned clear and cool, the forest ablaze with autumn colors. A small group had gathered for the occasion: the wildlife team, Dr. Blackhawk, and a few of the people from the highway rescue who had stayed in touch, including Martha and Gerald, Miguel, and Sophia. The transport cages containing Amara and her cubs had been positioned at the edge of a beautiful meadow surrounded by dense forest. Emma, now nearly 9 months old and beginning to pull herself up to stand, watched the proceedings with unusual solemnity from Olivia's arms. Dr. Blackhawk approached them, dressed in traditional clothing for the occasion. "Today marks the completion of a circle," he said, his deep voice carrying in the still morning air. "What began in danger now ends in freedom. What began with humans and bears thrown together by circumstance now ends with a conscious parting of ways, but not a severing of the bond." He removed from his pocket 3 small bundles of herbs tied with colorful threads. One he gave to Olivia, one he tucked into Emma's tiny hand, and the third he placed atop the transport cage containing Amara. "These are sacred medicines in our tradition," he explained. "They carry prayers for protection and remembrance." Dr. Chen gave the signal, and the transport cages were opened remotely. For several long moments nothing happened. Then Amara emerged cautiously, her powerful form silhouetted against the golden meadow grass. Her cubs followed, instantly captivated by the open space and natural scents surrounding them. Yet, instead of immediately heading for the freedom of the forest, Amara turned and looked directly at the small group of humans. No, not at the group, Olivia realized. At Emma. Without prompting, Emma raised her small hand in what looked remarkably like a wave, and then, to the astonishment of everyone present, she spoke her first clear word. "Bye-bye." Amara held her gaze for one more long moment, as if committing the child's face to memory. Then she made a soft chuffing sound to her cubs, who obediently fell in line behind her. With deliberate dignity, the bear family crossed the meadow and disappeared into the vibrant autumn forest. There wasn't a dry eye among the gathered humans. "Will she remember?" Olivia asked Dr. Blackhawk quietly as they watched the empty space where the bears had vanished. The elder smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "There are some connections, Miss Matthews, that transcend ordinary memory. They become part of who we are." 5 years later, Olivia adjusted the straps on Emma's backpack as they prepared to set out on the trail. At nearly 6 years old, Emma was an unusually confident hiker, her connection to the natural world having only deepened as she grew. "Remember the rules," Olivia reminded her. "Stay where I can see you. Don't eat anything without showing me first. And what do we do if we see a bear? Make ourselves big, talk calmly, back away slowly," Emma recited. Then she grinned, her missing front tooth giving her a mischievous look. "Unless it's Amara, then we just say hello." Olivia shook her head with a smile. Though she'd explained many times that they would almost certainly never see Amara again, Emma maintained an unshakable belief that they would someday reunite with the bear who had shared such an extraordinary experience with them. The hiking trail was part of a newly established nature preserve that encompassed the area where Amara and her cubs had been released. Dr. Chen had helped design educational programs for visitors, with special emphasis on bear conservation. Part of the proceeds from the visitor center went to support the wildlife rehabilitation facility. As they walked, Emma skipped ahead, occasionally stopping to examine interesting rocks or flowers. Her uncanny ability to spot wildlife before adults noticed it had become something of a legend among their regular hiking group. Today, though, they were alone on the trail, enjoying the peaceful solitude of the autumn forest. They had just reached a small clearing when Emma suddenly froze, her entire body going still in a way that instantly alerted Olivia to potential danger. Before she could call out, Emma raised her hand in the universal signal to stop. "Mom," she whispered, not turning around. "Look." At the far edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the dappled shadows of the forest, stood a massive brown bear. Beside her were 2 younger bears, nearly full-grown, but still recognizably offspring by the way they positioned themselves near their mother. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. She knew the protocol: make noise, back away, avoid eye contact. But something in Emma's posture made her hesitate. The large bear took a step forward, her nose working as she tested the air. Then, in a movement that defied everything Olivia knew about wild bear behavior, she sat back on her haunches in the sunlight, making no move to either approach or retreat. "It's her," Emma whispered, absolute certainty in her voice. "It's Amara." Scientifically, Olivia knew it was nearly impossible to identify a specific bear years later. Yet, as she watched the animal's calm, almost deliberate posture, doubt began to creep in. The bear's eyes, intelligent, assessing, somehow familiar, remained fixed not on Olivia but on Emma. Slowly, with the carefulness of approaching something precious, Emma reached into the pocket of her hiking vest and pulled out a small object that caught the sunlight. The stone bear carving that Dr. Blackhawk had given her all those years ago, which she still carried everywhere like a talisman. The bear's reaction was subtle but unmistakable. A slight tilt of the massive head, a focused intention in the dark eyes. One of the younger bears made a soft sound, almost like a question, and the mother responded with the same chuffing noise Olivia remembered from the day of the release. For 5 breathtaking minutes, human, child, and bear family shared the clearing in perfect, impossible harmony. No words were spoken, no sudden movements made. Yet Olivia had the distinct impression of a conversation happening beyond the reach of ordinary understanding, a reunion of souls who had once shared something profound. Then, with the same deliberate dignity she had shown that day in the meadow, the mother bear rose and led her nearly grown cubs back into the depths of the forest. Just before disappearing completely, she paused, looking back one final time. Emma raised her hand in farewell, the stone carving gleaming in her palm. "Goodbye, Amara," she said softly. "Thank you for remembering." After the bears had gone, Emma turned to Olivia, her face alight with joy and a wisdom far beyond her years. "See, Mom? Some things are meant to be remembered." Olivia wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders, gazing at the empty space where wilderness and memory had briefly intersected. "Yes," she agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "Some things are." As they turned to continue their hike, a brilliantly colored butterfly, the same impossible blue as the one from that day on the highway, fluttered between them, its delicate wings catching the autumn sunlight before it rose skyward and disappeared into the canopy above. Some connections, once formed, become part of the very fabric of the world, bridges between species, between wilderness and civilization, between what we understand and what we merely sense. And sometimes those connections remind us that the boundaries we believe to be fixed and unchangeable are, in truth, as permeable as the morning mist that rises from the forest floor, if only we have the innocence to see beyond them. In that clearing, on that autumn day, Emma and Olivia had been granted a rare glimpse of a world where all living things speak the same ancient language, a world that has always existed alongside our own, waiting patiently for us to remember how to listen.